We are back in the book of 1 Kings, and some of you are wondering about how long this is going to last. A couple of asked us meeting here and then meeting in there, and the lack of the whiteboard that I can keep my hands busy with. And I talked to Pastor Juan here some time back, and one of the struggles they've been having is, you know, they do the little fundraiser things with the food and all, and the ladies are always having to prepare while we're in class, and then they have to bring it all back out and put it out here. And said, man, it'd sure be handier if they were there, and then they could just go out back and have their meal outside when it's nice and inside when it's not. And I said, well, let's try it and see if we can get. And I know it's not, you don't get to have your coffee in here. I really apologize about that. But we thought we could try and see. One advantage is being able to pull up stuff. And I found some interesting things that maybe in the future we'll be able to use, that the new technology with Google Earth and things gives you some real unique things that you can actually look at the lay of the land and see what happened and all. And this is a Google Earth view right here. This is a satellite view of modern day Israel. So you can see the Dead Sea has changed shape a little bit over the ancient map of it. With the little peninsula, there's almost the water's receded there now to where, rather than sticking out from the side, it's almost at the bottom. So there's been a little changes there, but the Jordan River is still there, the Sea of Galilee or Chinnereth. This particular slide shows what we've talked about before, what the value of this piece of real estate and why it's the land that flows with milk and honey, besides its agricultural production, is these highways right here. And those of you who are way over there may not be able to see. I'm pointing at this one because there's a camera up here that I'm supposed to pay attention to.
Look, a little car.
A little car right there, yeah, going down the road. Can you see it? Yeah. So anyway, what these are in the red lines there are the main highways, if you will, that went through the land at the time of Solomon's kingdom. And the main north and south one is the King's Highway there, and then there's the Via Maris, or by way of the sea route, that goes down through the plain, and you'll notice that those go right through the Philistine territory was right here, and there's key cities of the Philistines lay along that route as well, Ashkelon and some of those other fun places that you've read about. So this is the toll road through Jerusalem. The trade comes through there, the business they bring, just having the caravans and the people through there, the taxes that you can levy on caravans carrying goods through, the main route from Africa to Europe and Asia and the whole rest of the world. They're just smack dab in the middle of everything. This, the sea highway actually goes on up north and then crosses over and it joins the King's Highway further up. And the King's Highway takes you all the way up to the River Euphrates and right back down to, and it's called the Fertile Crescent, that main highway through there. So this is the source of wealth, and of course Jerusalem being on the key route, you look at the topography out there in Jerusalem, in a rugged old place. Why in the world would you put a spot in there? Well, it's because this highway going across between the King's Highway and the one on the coast, and they're right there in the main thoroughfare through. Now there's other roads, ones that go from Jerusalem up to Bethel and places like that. But
Did you give us an idea of how many miles from Jerusalem to that King's?
there's, from here to here is probably, I'd say about 30 miles as crow flies, and this one's just a little more than that, maybe 40 or so. You know, it's not all that far in our sense of distance. That's the thing that really throws me, is that around here, we think any place, well, it's 100 miles to anywhere. Of course, I live in Bickleton. It's more than that to anywhere. So it kind of, the scale kind of is weird for us to live out here in the wide open spaces. But so it's not a huge amount of miles, but if you're walking on foot leading a donkey, it's probably a lot farther than if you're in the car. Anyway, I wanted you to see that, to see kind of a little different picture of this piece of land that we're talking about. This morning we're in 1 Kings chapter 13, and we're finishing up our look at the split in the kingdom, and Jeroboam's part of the kingdom. And as soon as my map controller has picked up her pencil there, I have her give me the map with Bethel on it, if you would. Here is a little more traditional looking map. You can see that Bethel lays up that mountainous area just north of Jerusalem. And this is the place that Jeroboam has chosen to kind of kick off his big new religious program. Remember, he substituted his own Feast of Tabernacles 1 month after the one that is commanded by God. And he's setting up this artificial religion, if you will, his own religion, and the whole goal of it is to separate the 10 tribes that are following him from going back down to Jerusalem and being pulled back to the faith that they knew, the people they knew, that would draw them away from him and his rule. So he's trying to use the religion of them to keep them out of Jerusalem and out of Judah. So he's really trying to draw a line of separation between himself, and he's using their religion to do it. And the thing that he's keying in on is he wants it to be familiar. In other words, he sets up things that are familiar to them. So he's picked Bethel as a place, and we'll look at in a minute why that's familiar. But he's chosen a place that has history and is familiar to the nation. He wants to make it convenient. Remember last time we looked at it, he said, it's way too much trouble for you to go way down to Jerusalem. Let's make it handy. So we put one right here in Bethel, place to worship, and there's another one up here in Dan that's off the map, just to give all of you a nice convenient place where you can go to worship. No trouble, no need to travel all the way down here. You can just stop right there, do all one-stop shop. Put your Walmart right there where it's handy.
Isn't it dangerous to do things, change things that God said, you gotta do it this way?
For him, it will be dangerous, you bet. And everybody that follows this idea.
We can't just say, adjust things to our own
Exactly.
convenience.
And that will be the problem that he runs into, because that wasn't the deal that God made. God said, I will give you those 10 tribes. And what you've got to do, if you follow me and follow my statutes, I'll set up your name, your family line, and I'll make a name for you. But if you don't, there's consequences for that. And so he's got the 10 tribes, but he's done it his own way. He's doing it his own way. And as we come to this passage, he has come down to Bethel, and he's instituted, again, familiar and convenient. He's gone to Bethel. Bethel has some history. I got a couple of pictures. They're not absolutely certain where Bethel might be, but one of them is this picture here, is where it might, you can see what the territory looks like. The possibility that it's in this particular area of modern-day Jerusalem, and you can see some ruins here on the hill and the view down the valley. Another fellow has an argument that it's just a little ways over, that it's here. And if you remember, Bethel has a real significant Old Testament location. This is Jacob's ladder, the place where he has the dream and he sees the angels ascending and descending. And the person that's researched this particular location and compared the archaeological evidence at both places and all these kinds of things and tried to put the Bible stories and what we know of cities that have been destroyed and not, and all that, he comes with the argument that it's this place, which is a little over from the last one. And he says, you can look at the Hebrew, and his argument is that we think of Jacob's ladder, and you thinking of a ladder. He says actually the Hebrew word could be like a stone staircase. He says it's not hard to see how him sleeping here in this location, and I don't know how well you can see the slide, but notice this big bluff here on this other side, and the stepped layers. Would that not fit right into a dream of angels ascending and descending a stone staircase? I don't know.
I thought of that first thing when you showed that. That's
So there's Jacob's staircase to heaven.
only for me could see it. I'm sure a bunch of wives would
Yeah, you just wonder if that has some validity. So you can see these places. The other thing that struck me about these is, man, that's desolate country. I don't know. For a land that flows with milk and honey, you go, boy, I don't know. Obviously there's some more fertile-looking places, but some of these places were rugged, and they're rugged for a reason, because that's what's secure. You build your city on top of a hill with a valley like that around it. It's much more easily defensible than being down in the bottom of the valley looking up at your enemy coming over the hill at you. So a lot of those places are on top of a hill, place that you can keep yourself safe. And of course, if you're grazing goats and sheep and things, that's what they did in this kind of more rugged territory. So that's this place Bethel, and you can see with that kind of history and a number of other things that happened after that in this location, that he's taken a place that's very familiar, has this sense of being anchored in our past and what we know. It's a holy place, if you will. What a better place to have a kickoff for your new feast that you've set up that is pretty much identical to the one commanded by God, just happens to be a month later. And we talked about that. You can justify that because their harvest is later up north. So it fits. So you can do it. It's okay. So they come down, and you remember he is, as we come to verse, I'm one page ahead of myself, to the passage where the prophet is called now to confront him as he's making this kickoff offering, and he's up at the altar taking the place of the high priest himself in chapter 13. The man of God comes to him, and we'll just read through this story a little bit, but we've been through the story of what happens at the altar. I want to follow up on that and what happens after the confrontation. Today is our study. It says, "Now behold, there came a man of God from Judah," this is chapter 13, verse 1, "to Bethel by the word of the Lord, while Jeroboam was standing by the altar to burn incense. And he cried against the altar by the word of the Lord, and said, O altar, altar, thus says the Lord, behold, a son shall be born in the house of David, Josiah by name. And on you he shall sacrifice the priests of the high places who burn incense on you, and human bones shall be burned on you. Then he gave a sign the same day, saying, This is the sign which the Lord has spoken. Behold, the altar shall be split apart, and the ashes which are on it shall be poured out. Now it came about when the king heard the saying of the man of God, which he cried against the altar in Bethel, that Jeroboam stretched out his hand from the altar, saying, Seize him! But his hand which he stretched out against him dried up, so he could not draw it back to himself. And the altar also was split apart, and the ashes were poured out from the altar, according to the sign which the man of God had given by the word of God, the word of the Lord. And the king answered and said to the man of God, Please entreat the Lord your God and pray for me, that my hand may be restored to me. So the man of God entreated the Lord, and the king's hand was restored to him, and it became as it was before. And then the king said to the man of God, Come home with me and refresh yourself, and I will give you a reward. But the man of God said to the king, If you were to give me half your house, I would not go with you, nor would I eat bread or drink water in this place. For so it was commanded to me by the word of the Lord, saying, You shall eat no bread, nor drink water, nor return by the way which you came. So he went another way, and did not return by the way which he came to Bethel." You go, man, that's a little bit weird, what God would command this guy. I mean, you see him coming and telling him, you are violating my law, you're violating everything, you're leading people into idolatry. I called you as a people to myself, and you're turning your back on me. And he's calling him, and I see God's discipline in this, also God's grace, because he has an opportunity to go, oh, you are right, to be pierced by the truth of what's happening here and to turn around. So there's God's grace in giving him this heads-up warning.
Plus, all the people see this
Everybody is there.
demonstration of God's power.
Yeah, thank you. That's the thing we tend to forget. We see the confrontation with these two men, and what you don't realize is, oh, this is the celebration We have thousands of people that have gathered for this great new celebration in town. The place is packed out, much like Jerusalem would have been, and for the Tabernacles festival, you have the first fruits, and then you go through to the Tabernacles, and everybody sets up their little hut and lives in the area. They're doing the same thing here in Bethel. So in this area where we're looking at, somewhere all around here, in the valleys or whatever, people would be set up with their little encampments, and they'd be there for a while. So we've got a huge audience that's there watching this thing play out. And I think we still got the high place altar in there on one of the slides. This is the rendering from an artist of the archaeological thing we looked at. So you can see him, he's up on this, gone up on top, and they've got the altar set up on this high place, and he's making these animal sacrifices up there, these burnt offerings on this homemade, newly made altar. When this guy comes along and said, here's the sign. And just briefly, there, you see, of course, his hand, it says dried up, but it's frozen out there. You can't pull it back, whether it's paralyzed or whatever's happened. His arm is seized up, and you would think right there would be heads up enough that God's in charge. It's amazing. He says, pray to him to fix it, and then goes right about his business, which just boggles the mind anyway. But then, the other thing is the altar being split apart and ashes poured out. And you go, well, they destroyed his altar, so big deal. And why is it important about the ashes spilling out? Even though this is modified from God's way of doing it, they're imitating what they've been taught, and ashes are important. What do you do with the ashes of the sacrifice? They're picked up and they're packed outside the city and ceremonially disposed of in a clean place. What happens when those ashes spill out and fall on the ground just anywhere? You can't pick them up again, and the offering is desecrated.
If it's windy, they get loaded.
What's that?
If it's windy, it gets loaded.
If it's windy, and you can see being up on the high place, yeah, they're gone. So it's God's condemnation, both of the altar itself, in the destruction of the altar, and of the offerings that are on it are unacceptable because they didn't go through the right process. So he's telling them the whole thing is gone. So here's the deal, and fascinating. Right after he gets his hand back, he says, y'all come down with me and I'll feed you dinner and give you a reward. What's that all about? He was just going to seize him, have him killed and drug off 2 minutes ago, and now he's got his hand back. And did he have a change of heart?
He probably was a little bit afraid, and so he wanted to treat him well before something worse happened.
Yeah, treat him well. And who's watching?
All people.
Everybody's watching. And how do you save face as the great leader of this new religion and this new land if you've just had your hand seized up by the command of this guy? Now what are you going to do? And you got it back when you asked him. This guy obviously has some connections, and everybody's going to know something's going on. Well, what do? You take him into your house, take him, feed him dinner. You do this proclamation. Oh, come on to my place. Oh, we made everything better. We've got right with each other, and we continue on business as usual. And so now you get to thinking about, why would the guy say, my command was to not stop anywhere on my way coming in, and when I leave, go a different way. And I don't want anybody to know where you came from or where you're going. You come, give your command, and disappear.
No eating or no drinking.
No eating, no drinking, no hanging out down there. Why? Because your message has to be clear. It's not that you got bought off by anybody to do anything. There's no compromise that somehow this place is approved by God, that his prophet would be able to hang out and eat and drink and stay here a while. I don't approve of anything that's going on. You come in, make your command, and you leave. And you go out a different way. It's really a clear message that what's going on here is under condemnation, and you want no part of it. God has no part of what's going on here. So it's really important to get that idea, because this next part of the story is really odd. If you read this, you're just going to leave you scratching your head. Because there's an old prophet that's, notice what he's doing. He is living in Bethel. And this new prophet came in, and his command was to do your job, get out of town. So think about that. This old prophet, verse 11, was living in Bethel, and his sons came and told him all the deeds which the man of God had done that day in Bethel, the words which he had spoken to the king. These also they related to their father. News travels. Doesn't matter where you're at, news goes out. And his father said to him, "Which way did he go? Where did he go?" And his sons had seen the way which the man of God who came from Judah had gone. And then he said to his sons, "Saddle the donkey for me." So they saddled the donkey for him, and he rode away on it under an oak. And they found him sitting under an oak. And he said to him, "Are you the man of God who came from Judah?" And he goes, "I am." And he said to him, "Come home with me and eat bread." But he said, "I cannot return with you, nor go with you, nor will I eat bread or drink water with you in this place. For a command came to me by the word of the Lord, you shall eat no bread, nor drink water there. Do not return going by the way which you came." Ah, man, I got the message. I'm not deviating from it. This is what I got to do. And then this most interesting thing. He's an older man. Got to remember that. Said, "I am also a prophet like you." And an angel spoke to me by the word of the Lord, saying, "Bring him back with you to your house, that he may eat bread and drink water." But he lied to him. In other words, there was no angel, no message. This is his own idea. And it came about, it gets really weird. You think it's weird now, it gets weird. It says, so he went back with him and ate bread in his house and drank water. Now it came about as they're sitting down at the table. They come home, he fixed the food, and they're sitting at the table at the invite of the old man. The word of the Lord came to the prophet who had brought him back. That's the old guy. This old prophet. And he cried to the man of God who came from Judah and saying, so he's loud voice. All of a sudden, first he's, "Oh, come to my place," and all this sort of thing. All of a sudden, out of this guy are these words. "Thus says the Lord, because you have disobeyed the command of the Lord and have not obeyed the commandment which the Lord your God commanded you, but have returned and eaten bread and drunk water in the place which he said to you, eat no bread and drink no water, your body shall not come to the grave of your fathers." In other words, you're a dead man. Oh!
Also, that was the whole of every Israelite who be buried.
Oh, yeah. This is the terrible thing. If you read the judgments on anybody, whether it's a king of Israel or anybody else that God says there's going to be judgment on you, he will say, the dogs are going to eat you here, or the birds of prey will pluck out your eyes and eat your carcass out in the wilderness. You will not be buried in the graves of your fathers. That is a terrible disgrace to not be buried there. So he's saying not only are you going to die, but you're going to die your family won't know what happened to you. You're just going to be gone. The discipline on you is going to be severe because I'm very, very displeased with you.
So, if God tells you not to do something, and then somebody comes along and says, well, God told me that it was okay for you to do this, you just make darn sure you don't do anything but what God talking to you directly says.
You might want to check in, yeah. You know, if you had a commandment, especially this guy's prophet had this revelation, direct commandment from God saying, do not do this. It was really clear.
He didn't say that he was going to trick and have a bunch of people.
Yeah, it didn't tell you what. It's like the counterfeit dollar bills or like $100 bills that bankers are trained to recognize, tellers are trained to recognize. Do they study all the phony ones? No, you study the real one. And you know what the real one looks like, so if you look at it and it doesn't look like that, you go, I don't have to know that that's a counterfeit because I know it just doesn't match the real one. So the concept here is if you study and know what the real command is, what the real expectations are, Do not allow someone to say, hey, let me tell you, I'm a prophet from God. I have this new amazing insight. Let me show you this new insight. I might even use a few scriptures to help support you. It says, don't go there. I take this really seriously. I'm really serious about this. And you got to wonder, this old guy, what's going on? What's with him? How is it that he's living in Bethel, in the middle of what's going on there? Why would he go and track this guy down? There's two schools of thought. And we probably need to finish the story to figure out which one is. One is that he's in cahoots with what's going on there, and he's trying to nullify the message the guy brought and make things smoothed over with the king.
And he certainly wasn't standing up.
Yeah, it doesn't appear that he's standing up for what God said to do. The other one is that he's an old prophet who's found himself in a bind because he is where he's at, not doing what he's supposed to be doing, and this young guy has just taken his job, if you will, and he's kind of checking that out, or I don't know what he's trying to get close to the guy who's close, get the connection back. I don't. Not sure what it is. Is it jealousy? Is it a desire to get close to one who is obviously controlled by God and try to find out why I've lost the connection with my God? Those are the two theories.
Maybe he's old and infirm, and couldn't get out of it.
It obviously wasn't well enough to go, and he wasn't attending the event. His sons were, but he wasn't. But he was well enough to get saddle up the donkey and go looking for the guy. So he's not totally helpless.
Makes you wonder how much time involved, between.
There's obviously some time that's taken place at least a day or within a day. You got to go back home and feed them and everything. And then we pick up the rest of the story where he gets the message and says, now when he had gone, verse 24, after this, I wouldn't think you'd hang around a long time after an announcement like that. It's like, oh my gosh, I got to get out of here now. I'm sure that was hurry home. So when he had gone, a lion met him on the way and killed him. Not unusual in that area that apparently there were trees somewhere out in that country, and lions were in that area at that time. Killed him, and his body was thrown on the road, with the donkey standing beside it, and the lion also standing beside the body. And behold, men passed by and saw the body on the road, and the lion standing beside the body, so they came and told it in the city where the old prophet lived. Duh.
Why was the donkey kept alive, but the man got killed?
Yeah, imagine this. You're going down the road on your way to Bethel, and here is this, there's a lion in the road. I mean, there is really a lion in the road, and you don't want to be run into a lion in the road on the way to Bethel. It's a bad thing to have happen if you want to stay around. And this thing's standing there by a donkey, and there's this guy's dead body laying in the road. It's obviously been killed by the lion. What's weird about that?
He didn't eat him.
Didn't eat him.
Didn't kill the donkey.
Didn't kill the donkey. And you go, this is the strangest thing I've ever seen. And so when you get into Bickleton, the first thing you do is go to the post office and you say, Jamie, did you know what I saw out there? And then pretty soon it's all over town. Does that work here? It must work here. It has to work everywhere. There's the coffee shop. Maybe that's it, the Market Street. You go in the cafe, go, man, you won't believe what I saw. And so this story goes all over town, and the guy hears about it. It's really important to think about. This story goes out, that everybody heard the story and it's gone out. So here we are. The word gets back to him, and so the old prophet says, verse 27, and he said to his son, saying, oops, maybe I jumped ahead. Oh, verse 26. I jumped ahead one, didn't I? Yeah. Now when the prophet who brought him back from the way heard it, in other words, the old guy, he said, it is the man, I mean, he knew it's the man of God who disobeyed the command of the Lord. It fits. He died. He's out on the road. He was killed by a lion. It's got to be him. And he disobeyed. Notice what he's now saying. He disobeyed the command of the Lord. Therefore the Lord has given him to the lion, which has torn him and killed him, according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke to him. This came through him. And he spoke to his son, saying, saddle the donkey for me, and they saddled it. And he went and found the body thrown on the road with the donkey, and the lion standing beside the body, which is still there. And the lion had not eaten the body, nor torn the donkey. And the prophet took the body of the man of God and laid it on the donkey and brought it back. And he came to the city of the old prophet to mourn and bury him.
Where was the dog? Where was the water?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the donkey and the lion. He loaded the guy on the donkey.
Where was the lion? It didn't say it ran away.
Yeah, he was standing there in the road when he left, I guess. Hopefully not too long, you get hit by a chariot, you know. So you got this strange thing. It's still there when he gets there and get this body. They're still there. And he loads him up and he takes him home. And this is interesting. He brought it back and came to the city to mourn and to bury him. And to bury him, he laid his body in his own grave, and they mourned over him, saying, alas, my brother. And it came about after he had buried him that he spoke to his sons. He says, this is in my will, boys. I'll make sure you carry this out. When I die, bury me in the grave which the man of God is buried. Lay my bones beside his bones, for the things shall surely come to pass, which he cried by the word of the Lord against the altar in Bethel, and against all the houses of the high places which are in the cities of Samaria.
Huh.
So, what do you think? What's your theory on this old prophet? Mine says, when you get down to the end and you look at that last part, it's inconsistent with the guy who's in cahoots with the new king and trying to curry favor with him. I see an old guy who had grown tired and allowed himself to get a little lazy in his occupation and had failed to do the job that God called him to do. And so God brought in somebody else to do the job. And he watched that guy and saw, and I don't quite understand why he lied to him to get him to come home with him. But you realize as you read this that the guy recognized he was at fault. I mean, he put him in his own grave, he mourned over him and said, my brother. I don't know whether he brought him back because he was trying to get his mojo back, if you will. He's trying to get back in God's graces somehow by having this young prophet that God had obviously spoken through in his home, not realizing in his kind of being out of touch with God that he was causing this young man to violate what God had said.
Don't you reckon God might have put him up to test?
We don't know what's going on with this young guy, and I think there definitely was a test here of him, and it was important that God's command be followed, and when it wasn't, do you recognize what God had to do to make his point?
God says what he
Means what he says, and what he said to that prophet, and what he said to the king are both just as important, because if he hedges on the prophet, he goes, oh, well, you know, he's a good boy. And most of the time he carries out what I say, and so this time I'll give him, you know, the guy lied to him after all. I'll give him a pass. I'm kind of caving a little on what God told him. I'll just give him a pass. Why is that not acceptable?
thought maybe the old man repented and realizes he's going to face God and no longer be in God's grace.
Yeah, he may have wanted to get back in God's graces. And God says, when my prophet failed to carry out his job, it nullified what I just told the king unless I enforce what I said. And this whole story comes out. Everybody hears about the man in the street with a lion there, the man on the road. They hear about that. It goes out. And the king knows about that. There's a hint to that. We haven't read yet. The king knows that this happened. And he knows what this other prophet said. And the other prophet recognized clearly that this guy was sent by God. And I think he got the message that he had failed. Doesn't tell us what he did after that, if he stood up against the king or if he got back on track. But he says, I want to be buried where this guy's buried because this guy was called by God. He was doing the job he was called to do. I'm the one that caused him to fall. Look at verse 33. After this event, Jeroboam did not return from his evil way. Okay, yeah, it's all happened and he didn't return. What it tells me is after this event, Jeroboam knew about this event. He knew about the event, obviously, when he has his arm paralyzed and all that. He knew the whole story. This whole story is one event. And he totally misses it. But he saw this. So he saw not only that the guy came and did this miraculous thing and the altar broke, he knows that this guy got called back. He heard the story. When the guy got called back, he had to go, oh good, he came back. That shows me that maybe this isn't, and then he gets killed in this weird situation where the guy's laying on the road and the donkey and the guy. This doesn't make any sense. It's totally unnatural. And that they're still standing there, if nothing else. That the lion didn't kill him and leave. And that whole story, and then what happens with this old prophet, and who knows what the old prophet was saying to everyone. You should listen up. This is what God meant. Right? He's in control, and sometimes he will use difficult, tragic things to carry out his will and to demonstrate his power. How many people that in that group saw this all happen? It tells us Jeroboam did, but you wonder, when we read about Rehoboam, we will find out that a whole bunch of folks in Israel that couldn't buy into this new religion pulled out and went to Judah. How many of them were standing there that day and went, oh boy, we're in the wrong place. There is no way God's buying in on it. Look what happened. So I'm sure there were people that heard and it turned them around.
It makes me think about the predicament of the old prophet. Maybe he was just, compromising things, and how easy that is for us to, we see things that are wrong. Do we take a stand?
Yeah. You don't want to make waves, Is it really that bad? And how, we're still getting together to worship. They're just doing it a month later, and they're following there's this calf thing, but they're still worshiping God. It's just, they got this calf instead of the, it's a little different, but it's familiar.
Isn't that like so much you hear today from people, run over here because,
They still worship, and it sounds, a lot of the same words and the same Bible they use a little.
I read the page yesterday on the faith section in the paper, and that man said, they talk about homosexuals and marriage things and all that, and he said, well, at one time, people interpreted the Bible that slavery was okay, so it's just the same thing. He said, I have my Bible beside my bed, and I refer to it, but it, isn't the word of God, he didn't say that.
Yeah.
Didn't.
Yeah, I like this part, but this part we really look at differently. And you can see other religious groups that have done that have taken what was once terribly wrong and they've, and it's true. There were a lot of slave owners who thought they were being good Christians and couldn't put two and two. In fact, you can find slavery in the Bible. It's in there, and there's even a command about slaves and masters. In Ephesians, how do you deal with that? Well, you have to go back to the basic principles that God said about how you treat people and those kinds of things, and then try to apply them to the culture and the place where you're at, and that's where you have to stand on those things. And have people done things that were not biblical and still didn't have God burn them up? Yeah, we're still here, aren't we? That just blows me away when you look at that, because it's easy for us to say, oh, no, we're following the straight and narrow and we're doing good. That's why God didn't burn us up and knock us dead and have us be killed by a lion on the way home. And no, that's the grace of God. The question we should ask not why are such so many good people getting bad things happen to them. The question we should ask is why all us bad people aren't having bad things happen to us. Because that's what we deserve. So we kind of asked the wrong question there.
It's because we have Jesus.
Exactly, because he is able to extend grace because before the foundation of the world, the sacrifice was made for us. So I guess the so what of this whole story that I see is that God's trying desperately for us to realize it's important for us to know the true message. We need to know what it says. We need to clearly understand what it says because out in the world there are lots of Jeroboams. And they are offering you something that's almost like what you know to be the truth. And all we have to do is step over. They're not going to ask you to go out and join a devil worship club. They won't. They may be out there, but that's not where you're going to get asked to go. Where you're going to get asked to go is some place that says, well, I think you need Jesus, but you really need this over here too. You need to be a good person. Or, Jesus was a really nice guy and he was a great teacher and we like what the Bible says. But you need to go by what you're convicted of in your heart and what you feel is true. You have to judge it by what you feel is going to be true. And they'll lead you, but it will be something familiar. It will be comfortable. It will fit with things and make it convenient for you. See, God wasn't convenient at all. He says, you work for 6 days, and on the seventh day, you get your carcass down here and worship. And he said, on this day is the feast day, you will come to Jerusalem and worship. And I know it's not convenient, but this is what I commanded. And we don't like that, so it's easy to make it, okay, well, you can come on this day, or that day, or next week, or next month, and that's okay.
God will understand.
He'll understand. He knows you're busy people. He's not going to put you out of your way. So it's those kinds of messages that we need to watch out for and be aware of and to know what it says here. So when you hear that, you can go, oh, he told me to go straight home, not eat or drink with anybody, anyhow, in this place. Thank you for the invite. I'm out of here. So it's that kind of head check of, okay, what am I hearing and why is that straight or is it not? And if it's straight, I can, oh, that's good. And then the door's open, you can do what you want. Let's close, we're about out of time. Father, we thank you for this lesson this morning, this tragic story of your servant who was in a key, critical spot, maybe one we will never be in ourselves, in a place so critical to the history of the nation that God absolutely, positively could not have his message compromised in any way. And yet, in some fashions, we do find ourselves there, whether it's before our children or before friends or acquaintances, or maybe just challenges in our own faith where that so-called old prophet comes up to us and entices us to come and do something other than what you have commanded clearly to us in your word, or accept something as fine that is not fine with your word. And because of the pressure of our society and the world we live in, we're tempted, as these folks were, to just fudge a little bit and step out of the way that you've directed us. Father, we don't want to be a bunch of religious people that with our nose in the air, somehow better than others, that go out and try to stomp on everybody that doesn't quite agree with us 100%. But we don't also want to be those weak individuals who are pushed about by every false wind of doctrine that should come down the road. Help us to find that middle line where we can treat others with grace and with respect, and yet, Father, for ourselves be as Joshua on that day said, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Father, help us to make those hard choices and make the choice to follow you and to do as you've commanded us and to seek your blessing and your glory. Thank you.